In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, the FireStore has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today. The FireStore, your trusted safety partner.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with Magnegrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnegrip.com.
Fire Service Data and Tech Talk.
Hey everybody, it's Eddie Buchanan with the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk podcast on fireengineering.com and all of fire engineering social media outlets. Welcome to another great episode. We're just back from TSI in Oklahoma City. It was an interesting conversation there. I'll talk more about that in just a second. And of course, the first thing to always talk about this time of year is FDIC is coming around the corner this spring, be in April in Indianapolis, and the registration is open, right? So you can go get registered for your hands-on training, your workshops, whatever you want to do. Be sure to do it soon because those things fill up. The really popular classes always sell out every time. So you want to make sure you get your name in the hat for that as soon as you can. I'm doing a workshop there. Monday, Tuesdays, workshops days, right? So I'm doing a workshop there called Operationalizing Data in the Fire Service. So it's kind of like a beginner's course for data. If you know that your fire department needs to be involved in such things, but you're really not sure where to start, that's probably the workshop for you. If you're running Python scripts and stuff for your fire department, this is probably go do something else. This is going to be more of a basic entry level kind of topic. If you think Python is a big snake, then this is the class for you, right? So that's some of the things you can look forward to at FDIC this year in 2025. So coming out of TSI, we had an interesting conversation there where we talked about what fire departments should know when they're buying technology, right? So I thought it'd be fun to have a conversation here on the podcast about that. And to make things fair, we're going to not mention any vendors. We're not going to mention any fire departments. We're going to strip all that stuff out. And the point of this discussion today is to talk about things that we have learned as people who work in the technology field as vendors now. What do we wish fire departments knew? Like what lessons could you use from the things we see other fire departments struggle with? So I've got two guests with me today. Each of us, like I said, we come from the fire service, but now work in technology. So we understand both sides of defense, all three of us. And I've got Mike Cox with me. Mike, say hello.
Hello.
And I've got Jill Cotton.
Hello.
So Jill, say hey there.
Hello.
So we all three, we spend a lot of time together at conferences and going around all these different meetings and stuff. And we're always talking about what happened with one client or another and how things have progressed. And there's some common themes. There's some things that folks could learn from, about things to avoid or things to do when you're looking at purchasing tech. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to keep it neutral, no names, no logos, none of that stuff, and just talk about what we wish fire departments could know. So I guess we'll kick it off. Jill, why don't you kick us off? Tell us, what do you think? First, tell us your background. You got a fire service background. How did you get into the fire service?
Yeah,
tell us about that.
Happy to explain that. So I always tell people from the actual fire service that I come from the other side of the fire service. So grandfather was a fire captain. On his side hustle, he serviced fire extinguishers. Long story short, he sucked my father into that. And then it was my father and two other fire folks that created a fire and life safety business. So for 35 years, our family ran an inspection, testing, and maintenance installation of systems. So that's how our company was formed. But I've grown up in that industry. So not only did I grow up in that industry, but I've been in tech within that industry for the past 14 years. So, and now,
so fire kid, basically.
Fire kid, 100%.
Yeah. Awesome. Michael, tell us about your real quick fire service background that we basically known each other for 100 years.
Yeah. Full disclosure.
I'm glad you guys are dating yourself.
Yeah, and I kind of grew up together. We won't get into the details of that on this one, but no, been in the fire service overall. It was 31 years total. Several as a volunteer, and then 27 years in a career department, the metro-sized department. Most of it operational. So when I started actually dealing with technology, or was responsible for budgetary processes and bids and all that stuff, it was a large learning curve. I mean, steep learning curve, because as an operational firefighter, you don't think about the long-term impacts of engaging in technology or engaging those vendors appropriately, and most importantly, you don't think about how do you engage with your IT department internally, whether it's in a city or county or whatever that might be. So hopefully we can talk about some of those tips and tricks that come from those kind of engagements.
Cool. Yeah, I came through the same pain, right? Coming up through operations, you don't know. And then you end up I was the admin chief. Actually, we were admin chiefs next door to each other.
Yeah.
And, I remember looking up, like the first time I heard somebody say RFP, and I had to go look it up on the internet to see what the heck are they talking about. And, okay, request for proposal. I got you. That's kind of thing of work that a lot of times operational people are up against is understanding that. So our particular panel here today is interesting because we have a small, medium, and large representation of tech companies, right? We won't say which one's which or who's from where, but all three of us were from different size things and see different sizes and different kind of environments of procurement too. So,
right.
So what do we think? Jill, what is the number one thing that you think every fire department needs to know when they're looking or considering technology? Like, I'm thinking I'm going to buy something. What's the one thing you want to tell me?
Yeah, I don't know if there's one, because I think they work in conjunction with each other. But I think the first thing that I would say is take your time to understand what your needs are first. I think when you're able to articulate what your needs are, no matter if you're dealing with internal IT or you have no IT, you will better position yourself to know exactly the fit when you start looking at technology. And I think in conjunction with that, right, it's okay to take the time. Take the time to look at your options and know why they're going to fit your mission or the needs that you're looking at technology for. That would be my first two.
It's almost like right out of the gate. The first thing we have to do out of the gate, I think, is probably complain about IT, right? Wouldn't that be the first place to start?
Yeah, I'm not going to say complain. Yeah, I'm not going to say complain about IT because, again, I think there's value to departments that have IT that helps protect them, but there's also obstacles in that same sentence, right? Especially if IT does not understand the needs of the fire service. And more often than not, that is the case. So it's not necessarily their fault. They just don't know. And that's why I go back to, really define what your needs are when you're starting to look at types of technology, because it's going to help you with IT, whether you have it or whether you don't have it.
Yeah, Mike, what's been your experience with dealing with both sides of the fence of IT?
Yeah, no, I definitely, agree with Jill in that. I think you need to very early on in whatever this, engagement and or adoption program is to engage stakeholders, like find out who your IT personnel are. I mean, you go by there and speak to them. Do they understand your priorities? Because often, if they're not under a fire chief, if they're a general government type IT department, their priorities are different than you as a firefighter. They certainly can understand life safety and property conservation if you go explain that to them. And so to help them understand what impact they can have by supporting their fire department and that saving lives and protecting property part, that's huge. So, your ability to engage those stakeholders and identify who's going to be critical in your technology identification. What do we need? The purchase. So it's not just IT, it's also your purchasing department and your budget personnel. Get to know them. Buy some coffee and donuts, as Chief Powers would say, and go by there and, and make nice. And then, the plan to actually deploy the technology is critical. So your end users. So who's actually going to use the technology and what fits for them, and, identifying those critical business needs and not just buying the next, shiny object. Oh, this is cool. Let's try this. No, let's have a plan in place. Let's identify the key stakeholders and have all of them involved from the get-go. And I've often had missteps by not doing that. Even like you were saying, understanding the RFP process, there's certain dollar figures. Once you cross a projected dollar figure, you have to legally in most states go out to an RFP of some sort, a request for a proposal. I mean, I've tried to write a check without doing that, and our finance people basically keep, like Jill said, they keep you safe, they keep you out of trouble,
they
keep you from breaking local laws to approach that process appropriately.
Yeah, I used to our old procurement director. I would often call him and go, "Hey man, I want to do this. Can you tell what do I have to do? Like, tell me how."
Yeah.
Like just point me in the right direction. Tell me the things I got to do. Let's just start there rather than find out later that we messed something up.
Yeah, because remember, we're not spending our money. It's a taxpayer's money.
Right.
So we've got to meet certain legal requirements there. But I mean, just the identification of the appropriate technology and the deployment model and or plan, it has to have the involvement of those key stakeholders. And the top of that list is obviously your IT director or whoever that is in your local government organization.
And I think going back. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jill.
I was going to say, going back to that, there's nowadays where some technology really doesn't impact internal IT infrastructure. So, I think that's another area when the fire service or the fire department's looking to implement is this even going to impact internal IT? And if it doesn't, how do we state that to an IT department? And then again,
how do you tell that story?
Yeah, how do you tell that story? And then for departments that don't have that IT, I think sometimes there's more of a benefit to them because they're not having to deal with those obstacles. But at the same time, no matter if you have IT or if you don't, understanding what the impact is internally is equally going to help you understand to share that with the stakeholders, whoever those may be, whether that's, again, just internally, whether that's purchasing, whether that's, your IT department. So.
Yeah, we had both an internal and external IT department. So our internal thing with the mothership that they had to talk to, and I would always tease our guys. I said, "Don't tell me no, tell me how." Right?
I love that.
We'll figure out if we want to pay for it or not. But don't just tell me no. Tell me what's involved, how much it costs, what are the what's the plan, how much is involved in that, and we'll go from there.
Mm-hmm.
And they would often be the ones that would smooth over the external IT guys, because they had those relationships in place. But that was kind of the point, I guess. I've actually had I know of one fire department that has literally been tied up for 2 years. They've been funded for 2 years on a project, and the external IT department they're stopped dead in their tracks. So they've been reappropriating a fair bit of money just waiting to get in line, So that I think that's the place to start is the relationship with IT, the technology department, and your procurement and your finance department. That's like make that note one.
Yeah.
As you're running on the treadmill here. So, Mike, what's the one thing? What's the first thing you want every fire department to know?
Again, that open communication establishes those relationships with the right parties, but I think also having a plan. And, it's important that we have a plan, not just for the procurement part and meeting those responsibilities on the budgetary side, but, how do we choose the technology? How do we deploy the technology and train our personnel? I often liken it to purchasing a piece of fire apparatus, right? We don't buy a fire apparatus without a spec. We don't buy a fire apparatus without going for inspections during construction, right? We don't buy a fire apparatus without having a training program. When that ladder truck shows up, every shift gets training, right? All 3 shifts got to show up and get training, get cut loose on that ladder truck. We don't traditionally or don't consistently do that on the technology side. Now, we've gotten as an industry, I think, better and better at that, but we still engage in technologies that we don't, like, Joe was talking about impacts earlier. How does this technology affect any of the other technologies I already have deployed? And will it require other adjustments, to get data from one application to another? How do we integrate those standing technologies? And those are things you don't want to have to find out about or have to figure out after you've already purchased the technology. That should be part of that deployment plan. So that, I think, my one big takeaway is have a plan, engage in it just like you would with an incident, right? We start with a strategy, following that planning P, similar things like set objectives and understand what the tactics are to reach your objectives. And that's important when we deploy technology, just like it is when we deploy personnel on an incident ground.
Well, I know John Morrison often talks about having some data governance in place, right? Having a written document of how you work and what's the identifying the one source of truth, so to speak, of how to find clean data.
Yeah.
That's always a challenge. So I think I love the apparatus analogy, Mike. Man, it's because I'm sitting here thinking, we had an apparatus replacement plan that was out 20 years.
Yeah.
It should have been 15, but it was 20. And we knew every year what we were going to do, and we had that funded long term, so the finance department could see that. I don't know if I've seen that in technology anywhere that I've come across.
I think there's one department, actually a few departments that I know that have technology plans. But I think I want to go back to something that you said, Mike, using that analogy. I think one piece of this communication needs to be the department communicating equally with their technology vendors that they're looking at. Do you have any information that you can provide me to help articulate what our needs are? What is your data governance? How do you handle these situations? I think equally communicating to the tech companies is so extremely important. And that's something that I know all three of us, it doesn't matter the size of our tech companies. We do see these same struggles. When we're starting to talk to fire departments, they're very hesitant sometimes to ask those types of questions. And I think it's okay. I want them to know it's okay to engage in conversations, because that's how you find out from the base of whether or not this type of technology or even this company is going to fit your needs as the fire service or as a fire department. So I think engaging in those questions or those concerns or that outline that you're looking for, the spec, asking the tech companies for that, because, traditionally we have that information, but we're not always asked for that until the RFP. I think sometimes that needs to come before the RFP, because that's how you really start to learn and weed out what really you're asking. What really is your ask here? And am I asking the right companies before I even start to engage everybody else? So I think, that's a very valid kind of analogy, if you will. And I love that. But I think the tech companies definitely need to be included in that.
There seems to be two ways, aside from the couple of departments that have a plan already.
There
seems to be two ways that this comes about. Number one, we have a problem, we're trying to solve it, and we're just kind of Googling around to see what we could come up with to fix it. And then B, the chief goes to a conference and buys something.
New shiny thing.
Right?
Yep.
New shiny thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing to get your head around, is that, if you have a plan, that would help maybe keep the chief and the credit card in check a little bit, and, to lay out some timelines of what comes first. Like a lot of times I've seen in my own experience in the fire department, where we were trying to institute a certain set of technology or something, but we didn't have the infrastructure in place to support it ourselves. We didn't have the pieces and parts or the GIS layer or whatever the heck it was, to be able to make the thing work in the first place. So it ends up sitting there,
Well, I think that's part of that strategy and governance that Jill referenced. You have to understand. You're talking about the ability for your network or your enterprise to handle some of these technologies. Mm-hmm. That's a reliability issue, and if we don't have a system in place that'll run whatever this new technology is, and it's not consistently deployable or builds confidence in our end users, the guys and girls in the fire station, it's either not going to be used at all or it's not going to be used appropriately because of the reliability issues. And then are you addressing, the security issues? We often, there's a bunch of different, web-based consumer level technologies you can leverage to do a lot of stuff, but are you giving away your data? And, Eddie, we've had this conversation many times in many of our meetings about, the AI capabilities are incredible, and we're using it. A lot of us as vendors are integrating it within our applications. But if you just go into any AI app online and start putting in what I'll call secure information, or let's say PII or something like that,
proprietary information.
Yeah, thank you. If you're not set up the right way, if you haven't adopted that technology appropriately, that data is then public and can be found, in other searches by other individuals. So that, reliability, security, and then like you're discussing specifically the performance of your whole system, the efficiency of the software. You've got to identify all these critical aspects before you apply the technology, because not only will that technology possibly not work, it can disrupt other systems you have in place, right? So you can't.
Absolutely.
So back to the apparatus analogy, I can't go buy an engine. If I got 5-inch supply line, I can't go buy an engine and put 4-inch on it, right? I've got to make sure it works within that system, within that enterprise.
Perfect.
Are we
Did you
going?
mention?
Are we
Go
going
ahead,
down
Jill.
the AI hole yet?
Well, I was going. We will. I'm making notes as we
I know.
go.
So I.
I
I
want
have
to
my
talk
pen.
about training, though. I think that's Mike mentioned an important thing.
Mhm.
I've seen it done very well and very poorly both. Right. And I'll give you two
Yes.
examples. I had one large metro that had a piece of technology that ran, and they were about to walk away from that tech. Well, I happened to know the chief that was running that situation, so I called him up and asked him what was going on. And after he described how they operated this within their normal operations practice, I agreed with him that you should in fact turn it off because we can't help you. You have to come back when the thing has evolved a little more, right? Like it was in such uh, very fluid, I'll call it, the way they operated. So it's hard to apply any kind of algorithm or technology to something when it doesn't make any sense. And then I've also seen counter to that the same piece of technology employed to a department that is very organized and had their act together. And what they did, the smartest thing I saw them do was they provided training for all the company officers on the technology when it was implemented, before it was implemented even, so that every company officer knew what the heck was going on. When this thing starts to influence how they operate, they have some understanding of why it's doing that. Why are things different than they were before, and they can understand some of the science behind the tech. Right. So I've seen it both ways, both great departments, but one with a plan and one without. And it's so I think that's an incredible, probably one of the most overlooked pieces I see with rolling out technology is having a formal training plan and making sure the vendor incorporates that into their deal. Like when you're signing a contract or making a purchase of some technology, be sure to include some training to come with it, and more than just a 3-hour quick hit on the webinar or something. I mean, you need like some legit training so that you can be sure that people that are anywhere in that universe of that technology have at least a baseline understanding of it. Now, I'll rant. What do y'all think?
No, I'm going to continue the rant because we're coming out of hurricane season. We just had some significant storms in the United States and North America, and we're into our after action reporting meetings type of thing. And this is all anecdotal kind of feedback, but every part of the response is dependent upon technology. Obviously, there's contingencies in place when you don't have connectivity or don't have power, and the guys and girls that responded, say in USAR context, kill it doing that. I mean, they understand how to operate in austere environments. But every discussion I've been involved with, and there have been multiple, near the top of the list. I mean, we're talking about remote sensing, satellite feeds, UAS, drone operations, wide area searches, flood modeling, impact of storm surge, all the stuff. And the first or second word out of every meeting is we need more training on this stuff, because a lot of the folks are getting deployed and it's the first time they're exposed to it. So training again is have a plan, and part of that plan has got to be training. And we do see a lot of agencies, or a few agencies, as Joe referenced, that have an actual technology plan. Even if you don't, at least have a section in your strategic plan, your overall organizational strategic plan, that addresses that technology. Because I can guarantee you, every other section of that strategic plan has some technology touching whatever those objectives or goals are throughout the plan. So you have to have some kind of plan in place to address those. But yeah, training 100%. That's a make or break technology deployment issue.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm going to start with, what do we know changes behavior? Education and consistency. So from a tech standpoint, training should absolutely also be a part of your plan to the customer. How are you going to educate? How do you provide continued education and support? What happens when there's turnover in the fire department, right? And I think it's making sure that there's that consistent follow-up and training, because we all have seen this happen. You train the initial users, they all leave, and then nothing. And then as a tech company, I know I've been guilty of this when working with other technology. Oh, well, it's not working. Well, it's not working because I'm not trained properly, or somebody gave this to me. I wasn't the one initially trained. So part of, it's a two, I think, pronged approach. Number one, the department definitely needs to have that incorporated, but so does the tech company. And I think that's something that we have gotten way better at as technology increases, because we know then the technology works. We know when people are educated and they're trained, they're going to be more successful in whatever technology that they're implementing. But I think our biggest kind of, again, we talk about this all the time. I know us three have, man, there's so much turnover. What happens when there's that turnover? Who internally is going to pass that along to make sure that next gen or the next people coming in are taking that technology and implementing the way it's supposed to be? I mean, that's something that we can only provide information on, but we can't control, right? So how do you continue to share that message? Well, hopefully doing this helps, but I mean, that's a valid concern.
There are two things, right? A, write down what you do. My goodness, because
how I'm being successful.
capturing the workflow, capture the workflow of whatever tech you're doing. If you happen to be sitting in the, I don't know, whatever admin seat or something where you have responsibilities for technology, it's critical that you write down what you do, because you're going to leave that. Ultimately, you're going to get promoted, you're going to get transferred. Paroled, however you want to look at it. You're going to get rolled out to the street again, and somebody's going to come sit in your seat, and they won't have a clue. Like the handoff has certainly been challenging. I know from where I sit, it's not uncommon once a month or maybe twice. I'll get the word that the lights went out, as we say. That we were talking to somebody. We had a conversation. We had a good working relationship with somebody, and then they just stop answering emails and stuff. And so I'll get contacted. Hey, will you go find out what happened? So I go knocking on doors. I probably know somebody somewhere. I'll go, bang on a door or two. Finally figure out, oh, they got transferred. They got promoted. Well, who's next? Who's the next person? Mm-hmm. And they, do they even know what they have? I've seen that happen where they have this whole fleet of technology and somebody's sitting in a new seat and they don't even know.
No,
they're completely unaware.
I hear this. It was thrown on my plate, right? It was thrown on my plate. And you're right. I think documenting this, and even, again, co-collaboration with the technology. One thing that we have seen work really well is co-creating a standard operating procedure. What are you doing internally that's helping you be successful? And let us kind of put that into a guide for you. Like, we have tech guides, but that doesn't apply to everybody because not everybody uses technology the same. But what are you doing internally that is helping you be successful? And that document should definitely constantly be updated and passed along. But you're right. I mean, writing it down literally makes a difference.
I think it's a key component in understanding what the end user actually needs.
Yeah.
I mean, that documentation, that understanding how it's being, exactly what you said, Jill, the user's manual that comes with a piece of software is probably not going to help the firefighter in doing the EMS report in the day or in the office after a call, or even on the apparatus on a tablet, right? That's what are the appropriate standard operating guidelines or SOPs you're going to develop within your agency, that one pager that really institutionalizes that use of technology. And in that same, I guess, vein, Eddie, I don't want to change the subject too quickly, but another issue related to that consideration for the end user is don't be a solution looking for a problem. How many times have we run into that where, the chief officer comes back from a nice conference and like, oh, I've got this app. I want to find a way to use it. That's not the right, that's cart before the horse stuff there. Clearly identify the problem, identify what you want as a return on investment or ROI. Hey, I would like to, increase the number of inspections I process, in a 3-week cycle or whatever it might be, or get the data back for analysis in a more efficient fashion over a given time period. Have those objectives set before you go look for the technology. Don't have a solution looking for a problem. And I think we've all run into that as well. So 100%. Focus on that end user, like you're saying, Jill. Develop those policies and written practice documents around how they actually use the technology in the field.
And I love that because something you guys know how much I personally love education and that communication aspect of it. But something that we make a practice of is literally when we go to train, it's getting them to be engaged with finding what the issue is from the beginning. Why are we here to train? let's talk about it. Let's throw the stuff on the table and help you understand that bigger picture. And when you do that, the understanding of the technology becomes personal, right? So now we're going, oh, that aha moment that you want people to have. It's really hard to get that without them coming to, the table, if you will. So it's one thing if the chief comes to you or the fire marshal, whomever, but then getting it out to all the users, that's, I think, another big key that you brought in, like give them that aha moment of what you're trying to solve. Yeah.
So do we dare talk about artificial intelligence and definitions and such?
Yes.
Whew. So, yeah, I think I don't know that we've landed yet on a fire service definition of AI. Have we? Do we have one?
Well, I mean, one of the best kind of documents so far that I've read was just recently released at the Urban Fire Forum. And it was written by John Oates and Chief Muncie on ethical use of AI. So I really feel like for departments who are kind of like, what do we do? Where do we even start? Start there. Start with at least having a basic understanding of what those key points are and what you should be looking for. Because, I mean, the term ethical use is definitely in the title. We need to talk about ethics when you're talking about AI. You need to understand what really does AI mean to your department. And I hope we talk about marketing tactics with companies just throwing out the term AI. We definitely need to talk about that because we need to protect the fire service from those marketing tactics. But I'd say if any fire department,
I think that's an important part of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, so even defining what that is, and I think that's one of the good things that fire departments can do when somebody presents them with, "Hey, this is AI." Okay, explain it to me then. You need to go digging into that and understand what that definition actually means and what does the analysis or output represent. Because you can, if you move a little thing on a map and you let the little wheel spin in 5 seconds and it gives you all this data back, I don't know. That might not be as deep of an analysis as you might want, right? So you want to be thoughtful, even if you don't understand necessarily the tech or the data science or whatever it is that you're looking at. Ask the questions and make them walk you through the process so that you understand what level of accuracy does this actually represent. Or, I mean, I've been in situations where I've heard people talking from the stage and they're describing all this artificial intelligence, and I'm sitting there going, I don't know. I didn't think we were AI, but from what they're saying, I guess we are, but we don't think so. I mean, it's interesting how it's defined and labeled at this point. Right now, I don't know that it's a label I would trust. It's not like a UL label on a lamp. Well, it's not the same thing.
It's funny. I had this conversation with Chief Morrison, in Fairfax, and he said, I don't even yet trust the data that's coming from my own people. We still are weeding that out. So how am I fully going to trust AI to comprehend that data? And I said, right. That is, yes, exactly. But the way that we can start using AI, I think tech companies are already doing it. You see it more on the back end, right? Back end processes, maybe not so much some of the larger tech companies out there, but for small to mid-size, at least in my side of the fire service, the data does not yet exist for some things for AI to be able to be effectively used for. It just doesn't. Or should I say it exists, but it exists in a vacuum. There's really only a handful of, I would say, organizations that even contain the initial data sets to start to train AI for what we specifically do. So that is where, again, I think we have to first, and you're right, ask, what is AI going to be used for in our department? And then have that conversation with how are you using it as a tech company? Because I think when people hear the term AI, they think it's automatically been vetted, and it hasn't, or it hasn't even been defined. That's a great way to start. Define what that means to you. What does that mean? What are you wanting it to do?
What's your experience, Mike?
Yeah, I think I mentioned a little bit of it earlier. The biggest concern for me right now is the security issue and where's your data going as you leverage AI. If it's not, in some kind of internal application, which there are those out there as well. But yeah, it's obviously going to make our jobs easier. I think you'll see more and more around things like report writing and some of the repetitive actions we take in a digital world. I think the fire service is probably quite a ways off from not having a human in the loop when it relates to anything that touches a customer, right? If we're talking about fire reporting or inspections or whatever, I mean, there has to be some kind of verification process in currently. And honestly, that's how these models are improved, right? I'll give an example of imagery analysis machine learning model that say detects fireworks launch, because we had a project around that for a little bit. And there, the human in the loop doing some QA QI actually improves that machine learning model's analysis of that imagery and verifies that you're moving in the right direction. And you very quickly go from a 96% accuracy rate moving up to 98, 99%. I'm just throwing numbers out there but based on the human in the loop QA QI, we're seeing it more and more for damage assessment and those kind of imagery analysis workflows. But where I think you'll see a very large leap in the fire service is on the back end, like Joe was referring to. Coders still have to know how to code, don't get me wrong, but the volume of code they can produce, with some legitimacy or some value is increasing. I could say tenfold, but I don't even know, because now you have an AI that'll write the code and basically you're just going back and checking over it and making sure it's okay. And again, another one where you got to worry about security, because if you don't have that AI locked down, who else has got access to the code after you write it, kind of thing. But I think you'll see a lot of the, again, more mundane report writing, things like that are going to be taken off of your plate, because it'll be much more efficiently accomplished by AI, and AI that's learned from us as an industry. So you'll see more and more fire specific, I think, artificial intelligence capabilities as well. But I mean, Eddie, exactly as you said on the marketing side, or Joe mentioned, be careful, approach the vendor and ask about the development, ask about how AI is QA, QI'd, or, how do you assure it's accurate? My favorite example I give currently is you can go buy an AI golf club. What does that mean? Well, they designed it using some kind of machine learning model. So it's not going to actually help you hit the golf ball that much better.
Oh, darn it.
Golf ball for you.
Mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Forget it.
But so, yeah, that engaging your vendor appropriately, again, open communication and ask the right questions around AI is like the critical component currently, because you don't want a system in place that could somehow, give the wrong patient data or give an inaccurate route or whatever the analysis,
or give data away that you don't or shouldn't be given away,
Exactly.
Yeah. But there's no doubt you brought something up. And I think, Eddie, you and I have had this conversation about, AI is going to significantly enhance decision making, right? And that's pretty amazing. And we're already seeing it, especially I think like in drones. I think that's a really good example. But are we going to allow AI to make a decision on somebody's life without the human loop, right? That human loop is still so necessary in our industry, right? In the fire industry. And I think that's, again, a message that should be definitely stated and educated to the fire service if they're considering AI. And I'm going to go back to, the position statement. That's a really good place to start, because it talks about transparency. It talks about data protection. It talks about security. So again, it's a good place for tech companies in the fire service. If we're going to start developing, what is the fire service looking for, and what can we give them when it comes to AI? So I mean, it's pretty phenomenal, but it's definitely still, it needs to be definitely talked about, needs more education. And we definitely need to be able to have, I think, larger conversations about the impact.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a major player. I don't know that it's anywhere near there yet. We've got a long way to go as far as being able to trust it with anything critical. But I agree with Mike. It will pick up some mundane stuff. Mm-hmm. And you use the golf example. I'll give you a drum example, right? A musician. So I went and played drums on a track the other day that was what we were doing as a gift for somebody. But they had generated an AI song about their cow. They have a cow. And it generated this AI song. It was actually, the lyrics are actually pretty good. But it sounded like it was a little bit of every song that you've ever heard on the radio. Mm-hmm. Like you could hear all the songs in there, and it had 3 endings on it. right? So we had to decide which ending we were actually going to use. So it's a little bit of a albatross, when it comes out the other end. It's not quite there, but I think as they refine the the capabilities, and
the damage assessment machine learning models are incredible. I mean, not even this hurricane season, previous hurricane season, FEMA got relief checks out in record time, 8 or 9 days after Hurricane Ian hit Western Florida, which was a record. I mean, they'd never done it that quickly. Usually it was weeks. They got it down to days because all that damage assessment could be confirmed using a machine learning model. FEMA USAR branch, Urban Search and Rescue branch, they're using it within their divisions and their search segments to determine how many homes have actually been searched, and then how many do we have to go back in, in that area, in that division, how many people do we have to send back in the next operational period? And they're doing that just based on a machine learning model analysis. So it's not they're reading every report or every submission. They're putting all that data in one place and having a machine learning model run through it. And they say, okay, in this search segment, there's still 800 homes that have not been searched or assessed. Just incredible use already. But what I'm looking at and what you're going to see, probably during our career is, hey, I've got, a language model app in the back of the ambulance, and I can talk about protocol, based on symptoms of a patient and get recommendations from, an AI app of some sort. I mean, those kind of conversational analysis or Q&A, that capability's out currently. So you're going to see more and more of that in a clinical setting. And that's where, again, we have to be careful about how we approach it and make sure that we're not sharing the inappropriate data or not getting.
That's a good way to separate it out, right? The difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence. Those are kind of that helps me even in my own head. Okay, machine learning is something we're seeing like with damage assessments. It's
just a small segment of your AI.
Correct, right.
Yeah. Where AI is something a little bit more broad. It's something you can talk to,
Language models,
Hey Siri.
Right. Oh, you just set off all my stuff.
Do my job for me. Just kidding.
That's fair. So I'm curious to see what y'all think. You mentioned drones. I'm a big drone fan now that I've seen that they have thermal imaging capability. And when I see an aerial view of a structure fire, my propeller spins pretty good because you can see flow path and some things you couldn't see from a horizontal plane. Mm-hmm. So what would advice would you give a fire department? We'll just use that as an example. Where would you start? Okay, I want to get into that piece of tech. I want to deploy that in some way. What would be like some of the first steps you would take to launch into such an endeavor? Like maybe the first 3 things.
Well, define the objectives, identify what your budget is. And then put a team together. I think probably the first 3 things. So and most of us are using it for emergency response. And I think the concept you really need to look into as a fire chief or somebody that makes decisions is the drone as a first responder concept, because we have agencies currently that put a drone out, a UAS out in front of police and fire units, throughout and typically this is in a, densely populated city or urban setting,
right? But
where you've got drones essentially, it's called BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight operations. You don't have to have that aircraft within visual distance, but you can send it on out in front. And we've seen time and time again, case study after case study, where that actually made a difference in the response because you can verify what the conditions are. One of my favorite and one of the leaders in that space as a drone as a first responder is Chula Vista Police Department in California, in Southern California. They show an instant response, a case study where it was reported, subject with a weapon on the street somewhere, and they sent the drone out first, and ended up being like a bunch of 12-year-olds with a cap gun or a fake plastic gun. Now the drone got there, they were able to verify that, and then everybody kind of toned it down. Right. So, okay, I'm not coming around the corner, about to put somebody. Yeah, exactly. About to put somebody down. I know it's a juvenile playing. Yeah. And while they still had law enforcement contact, that contact was in a much different context than if those police officers had showed up thinking they had, some kind of threat. So those kind of things. And then just the on scene, that additional set of eyes as you're doing your continuous, 360 or whatever it is, size up. And to be able to have something with thermal imaging, Eddie, you've seen that, I know, time and time again, where you can see some of the fire spread within an attic, even though it's not vented, I can still see where most of the heat is and how it's progressing. Things like that not only help us, more efficiently with our tactics, but make it safer for the firefighters operating, particularly around structure fires. And then wildland's a whole different game. I mean, wildland, the UAS they're using there, they're using military grade, staying on station for hours at a time, with the thermal and visual and everything else.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's amazing.
So defining the objectives, you said that was the first thing.
Right.
What this is and what this is not.
Yes,
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
We're not,
Well,
within the capabilities of your budget.
Exactly. And I'll give you a great example is, back in my department back home when we started our robotics team, one of the first questions from our elected officials were, how is this going to be used for law enforcement? How is this going to be, invasion of privacy potentially for our county residents? And, part of the initial SOPs and part of the initial deployment was this will only be used for life safety. It will not be used for things like, warrants or, those kind of things. But if there's a life threat, law enforcement could use it, but they weren't using it for day-to-day law enforcement operations. And that was a requirement of our board, of our elected officials, of the true bosses, right? So those are the kind of things you have to hash out before you deploy these robotics and these kind of programs.
And I'm going to go back to something that we first talked about is also, it's okay to ask these questions of the vendors. It's okay to have these conversations, with the tech companies who are experts in their field. Hey, what do you suggest? Are there any other questions we should be asking? I think building and establishing communications with multiple vendors that you're looking at or a single vendor that you're looking at, they should also be able to help in this process of really identifying what your parameters are, what your needs are, and even at some level, maybe what your budget is, especially if you're brand new to this and you don't know where to start. I think that also goes back to, transparency and just building relationships between the vendors and really what they do, what they don't do. I think that also helps make really informed decisions on this type of technology.
Well, I'm just sitting here blowing my head off here, thinking, I wonder if drones will impact response times. Like, how do we count that? If we have eyes on the scene, is that a response?
Oh, that's a good question.
So there's a department that started doing that, a metro department, and they're using the drones. The second they get dispatched, the drone is out first, and it is assisting in response and also where they should actually be responding to. Because there's been, a few where it's actually the building next to it, not the building they were called to. And so it's helping identify those areas. I got to sit in the class when they were showing how they did that. It was fascinating, just mind blowing. But I didn't ask them how they came to the conclusion to do that. So I was just like, wow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're behind the eight ball, right? Like if we're still trying to get data governance straight, and we've got fire departments flying unmanned aircraft to arrive on scene first. So we've got a pretty broad disparity of capability. What do we think about? Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, and then within 2 or 3 years, you're going to be able to buy a $30,000 humanoid robot that could literally tote stuff for you. Mm-hmm. As a mass production, we already have, Boston Robotics and Fido and those kind of things, but you're going to have, a humanoid day to day, it's going to be in people's homes. So we know we're going to use it, fire and EMS have to.
Yeah.
And so how do we integrate that appropriately? How do we make sure we can leverage it where it's efficient and, still maintain the human side of our fire and EMS service delivery,
which is a must.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We were over in Singapore, and they were running a couple of units where they took the fourth firefighter off of it and put basically a small tracked robot on the engine. It could fit in a residential elevator, could climb stairs, it carried 30 liters of water with a nozzle and a vent fan on top. So essentially, the theory was it could put out a kitchen fire by itself, with no firefighter with it. You basically control it with an Xbox controller, send it down the hallway into the kitchen, dump, 6 or 8 gallons of water, and hopefully you've knocked it down at least. But that's with nobody on the hose line, no water supply. You can send that thing in initially for an initial attack. I think those are the kind of things you're going to see coming out over the next, decade or two, if not before, is the ability to actually keep people out of hazardous environments, which is ultimately what we should be trying to do, right? Or taking the appropriate amount of risk and still provide that service to the customer and provide for that life safety and property conservation. You're going to see more and more of that, guaranteed.
It's fascinating to even think about that. But going back to where we started, where do we even start? Where does somebody start when it comes to best practices in development, best practices in buying and purchasing and training? There's all these different factors when it comes to technology. And I'm just going to go back to start, your baseline, understand what it is that you're looking for before you can get to if you're going to buy a machine or not to do your job. So I think the other thing the fire service industry, doesn't necessarily talk about from a tech and development standpoint is how development actually happens. And I think that's an important piece of this conversation is, are you a part of development in the fire service if you're from the fire service? Because there is a difference in technology that is specifically designed for the fire service versus it's thrown in as an afterthought. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
We have, as an industry, spent far too long trying to make other people's crap work for us. We need to have the stuff built for us.
Oh, we're talking about CADs now.
Oh my gosh! But industry-focused applications. Yeah, industry-focused applications. We're seeing more and more of it, but that should be the norm, not the exception. So exactly, Jill. I'm tired of every personnel program that comes out or every whatever shift scheduling stuff that's not built for a 24-hour shift. Things like that over and over and over throughout my career for 30 years, and trying to make adjustments to your organization to fit the product. That's BS.
Yeah.
Find the product that fits your organization. There is obviously some change in day-to-day ops for certain technologies. Don't get me wrong, but it still should be something that's designed for or focused on your objectives, your strategies, and not the road department's software that we have.
100%. And it's really, I think it's kind of, I don't even know the right word, sad, frustrating when we go into departments and it really doesn't matter the size. What matters is, well, we have to use this because our other government agencies are using it, but it doesn't work, but it's not costing us anything extra, but it is costing you. It's costing you time. It's costing you money, whether you know it or not, because it's costing you frustrations. You can't get things done. And so again, what we're trying to do and what we've done recently is just engage more and more people. And how do you state that to your other government agencies? Bring them into that conversation to be able to show them how it's actually not allowing you to be more efficient. And it's a frustration from the fire department side of things. And as you know, as a tech company, when we stay in our lane and you do something very, very well, it's hard to kind of compete, if you will, with people who are like, oh, you just have to use this because, XYZ in our city uses it, and they're stuck. And so that's
almost like a solution looking for a problem.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So we see
certainly some HR stuff. I've seen that on the HR side of the house a lot.
Yeah.
Where that's what the HR system wants to use. Well, I'm like,
what's a 56-hour work week? It's what almost every fire department in the United States does. That's what a 56-hour work week is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Been there and done that.
Yep.
I think that's why. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's why, when you talk about what happens when even leadership in tech companies switch, so there's two sides of this coin when it comes to development. There's the development by people who are not truly developing for the industry, but what if they are, and then people come in with different leadership and they're not developing for the industry? That I'm seeing impact a lot of different companies in the fire industry right now. And again, I'm going to go back to, if you have a good relationship with your vendor, that transparency, those relationships, that information should start to come out naturally, or you should be able to talk about it. Hey, listen, in 5 months, we might have some leadership change, but here's what's going to be happening. And I don't think there's enough of that from a technology standpoint, and there should be. That's
a great point, is to try to understand. Well, we talk about getting to know the vendor, right? And make sure you have those relationships. They're a stakeholder as well. So we have to have that open communication with those stakeholders, but then understanding how their leadership impacts your organization. That's an excellent point.
I've taken it 2 times in my career when I was at the fire department, where I had 2 different contracts where I fought really hard to get them. because I wanted that quality,
Mm-hmm.
that relationship with that vendor and that quality product. Then changes happened for one reason or another. They were either consumed or bought or transitioned to something else or whatever. And then something I fought so hard to get, I then fought so hard to cancel.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it wasn't what it used to be. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It used to be a very custom, very tailored kind of thing that was very specific to our department. And then it became this lower quality thing. I think that's probably a little sub note to add for the fire departments listening is that, you want to have that positive relationship with your vendor and maintain that. And also have a plan B or C, like that as things change, they're not going to be that way forever. Probably won't, we hope they are. Our goal of the three of us is that we maintain those quality relationships long term.
Yeah.
But be aware that that's not always the case for everybody. So,
Yeah,
plan
absolutely. And again, it really comes down to just relationships in the fire service with your tech companies, and transparency. I think, and now we're being a little bit vulnerable here, are we not, being tech companies and talking about some of these things? I mean, some of the vulnerabilities is, you have to allow our companies, as technology or software, whatever category you put us in, there's going to be changes. Allow us and give us time to change and grow, but also, as long as we're communicating that, as long as we're being transparent in where we're going and how we're doing things. Yes, we do this. No, we don't do that. But when there's a big shift and that's not communicated, and all of a sudden, changes are happening, what I would suggest is give it time, allow that time, because you never know, it could be good. And if it's not, you're right. Go to plan B, know what other options you have, because you definitely, right, at some point that technology and that vendor needs to fit your needs as a fire department. That's what it comes down to. Are we fitting your needs?
Amen.
Yep. Yeah.
I think, if I was making notes, I would think the first thing to do, if you haven't already, is size up, right? What do we have?
Yeah.
What's this?
Yeah.
What's the scope of our technology program here in my department? What are the parts? What are the pieces? Mind map it, maybe. That's what we used to do. We would have a mind map of all our tech, so we knew what was connected to what, and what was who had this and who had that, and all that stuff. And then start what's going to be going forward. Like what are the initiatives that are in your 5-year, 10-year strategic plan that are going to probably cost money, because it always does, that you can start communicating those needs ahead of time.
Yep.
Absolutely. Any parting shots? Anything you want to pass along before we wrap up?
I got a few. Yeah, I can.
What you got?
So, I mean,
just
so if you're a fire chief concerned about technology adoption, I think we go back to where we started, and that is have a plan in place, whether that's a technology strategic plan, whether it's part of your existing strategic plan, or just a workflow, a policy, a procedure, whatever, to follow to engage in or to deploy technology. And that includes identifying the stakeholders and end users and understanding what their needs are. What is the goal or the objective of the technology? Again, we're not just a solution looking for a problem. Make sure that the goals of the technology deployment line up with your business goals. Like ultimately, we should be trying to reduce fire loss or increase, cardiac arrest save rates or whatever that might be. And then, focus on the training aspect of it or the awareness aspect of it. That I think, again, like we discussed earlier, is a major component in whether the technology gets used appropriately. Because while you on the administrative side, the budget side, the training side may know that this technology is completely perfect for your agency, if the personnel in the field don't engage appropriately, don't agree with that, or don't understand how it should be deployed, it's not going to be successful.
Absolutely. Jill, you got any parting thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, I sometimes try to categorize things, and I categorize them first by people. So focus on what your people need, like what Mike said, right? This is about what really are your needs. How's it going to impact people? How's it going to impact the people in your department, but equally out in your community? What are the processes that are going to be involved in this? And then you can understand that type of technology that's going to fit into your fire department. And I think you definitely need to consider, right, those relationships and how you communicate, the ethics of a vendor or a software. So I think there's all these other factors that come into play. But I think, again, I definitely agree with what we started with, going back to the beginning. What is your need? Identifying that, bringing the stakeholders together, and having just a really good understanding of what your options are.
Plan, train, communicate. That seems to be the theme of the day, right? Maybe grab a copy of NFPA 1022 if you're just getting started in the data thing.
Yeah.
Grab a copy of that
Great
and
advice.
use that as a roadmap.
Yeah.
Great
that's
advice.
The great takeaways of the episode. Well, thank you very much for spending a little time with us today to talk about this. I think it's a cool episode because it's not something you're going to get to hear normally, right?
Yeah.
To hear the kind of behind the scenes thing of what goes on with technology and procurement and all that sort of thing. So I appreciate it. And I will see you at the next, whatever it is. I'm sure it's something.
Thanks, Chief.
We're always somewhere.
Thank you
very much.
Appreciate it.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk on Fire Engineering. Look for it on all the social media outlets. You can always find it there. And you can also find it on YouTube and see if there's actually a list of all the shows. And if you've got an idea or any feedback for the show, please let me know. You can find us on Twitter at Data Tech Talk is the handle there. And you can also find me over on LinkedIn, just under my name, Eddie Buchanan. And then on Facebook, we have a page for Fire Service Data and Tech Talk. So hope everybody has a good holiday season, and we'll see you back in 2025. Everybody stay safe.
In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, TheFireStore has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit TheFireStore.com today. The FireStore, your trusted safety partner.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with Magnegrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit Magnegrip